once again, we're in Manhattan, but we have a story that certainly involves Brooklyn. I'm with a lady, my guest, whose name is Minnie Handy Hansen. And Minnie, if I said, who was the father of the blues, what would you say?
W.C. Handy, of course.
Okay. And it started down where?
I can't say exactly where it started. I've always known he was called the father of the blues.
Excuse me, what's your name?
My name is Edwina
Is it Edwina Handy?
DaCosta,
Aha.
actually.
Well, we're in the Handy Music Publishing office.
We sure are. Handy Brothers Music Publishing Company.
And where's the office located?
We're in the Ed Sullivan Theater building, where
Okay.
the David Letterman show is now broadcast out of.
As soon as I walked in the door, I saw a picture of WC standing with Ed Sullivan, which is certainly, it makes sense because we're in the Ed Sullivan Theater building.
And it was quite a coincidence that it turned out that way.
Ed Sullivan, to me, means sitting in front of the TV around 4 years old and seeing great-grandfather on stage with Ed Sullivan. And then again at 6 years old. It was phenomenal because Ed Sullivan, Maverick on Sundays, Aunt Minnie's chicken, peas and carrots, and Jell-O with fruit cocktail. This was a regular Sunday. And so for great-grandfather to be on Ed Sullivan, we knew he was special.
Now, can I ask you this? How long ago did he found the company, and what was his intention? What was he trying to do?
Well, he was in Memphis at the time, and he was asked to write a campaign song for Mayor Crump, and he wrote Mr. Crump. After the campaign was over and Mr. Crump won the election, 3 years later, he continued to play it, but 3 years later he changed it to Memphis Blues and published it as the Memphis Blues. And one of the reasons he started his own publishing company, and at the time it was called Pace and Handy Music Company, was because there wasn't a venue for black composers. So that got him started into the publishing business. In 1918, he transferred the business to New York, and we've been on Broadway ever since, on and off Broadway.
Now, he was originally a musician, right?
Yes, he played the trumpet, conducted bands for parties and things.
Now, when he came to New York and began the publishing company from New York, he worked with his brother.
Right, the Charles Handy.
Now, I understand that there's a connection between Charles Handy and Brooklyn, New York.
Because we're talking about the Brooklyn connection between Handy Brothers Music Company. Handy Brothers celebrated in May a total of 91 years of publishing, which Charles Handy, who was a resident of Brooklyn for at least 30 years, we know for sure, active in his church and in his entire community. His wife was one of the first blacks in administration in the Brooklyn schools after teaching for 20 years there. Okay, so...
Well, Charles Handy, who was my uncle, always lived in Brooklyn as far as 1937. I think about the earliest I can go back to was around 1937.
Can you remember where he lived?
Well, 142 Quincy Street was, I guess, the only address I've known.
Handy Brothers was the office. We never said we're going to Handy Brothers. On occasion, we would, before Mrs. Hansen, Minnie Handy Hansen, married, we'd go to the office with her. I remember once or twice going with my mother.
If we look around this office, I mean, the walls, you can't see the paint. There's so many photographs.
I know. It's a wallpaper of pictures.
Right. It's almost like a living history or a diary of the company and of the different eras.
Right, because a lot of these pictures were taken before I was on the scene.
Okay.
And it's quite interesting to go back, and quite a couple of the pictures we have since come to meet the musicians who appeared in those pictures. Doc Cheatham, Benny Waters, Milt Hinton.
How did it make you feel as a young girl meeting all these very, very famous people? Did you regard them as just grandpa's guests at the house, or?
Like I said, when you see that this is your life, this is your environment as a child, you don't realize that there's anything outside of that. You don't realize that there are not a lot of little girls at 5 years old of African ancestry, Negro or colored, we were referred to at that time, that watched the Macy's parade from the 5th floor of their great-grandfather's office on Broadway and 52nd Street. You just did not think that you were special. You thought that everyone had a grandpa like that.
He was due to play for the Chicago Exposition in St. Louis, and it was canceled for a year. So he didn't have any engagements. Maybe he's got little odd jobs to sustain himself, But he was sleeping on the cobblestones along the Mississippi River under Eads Bridge. And he heard a lady singing one night, "My man got a heart like a rock cast in the sea." And it wasn't until years later that he put that experience in his song, St. Louis Blues. Because, and if you know the words, "I hate to see the evening sun go down," he had to sleep on the cobblestones, and he hated for nightfall to come. See, so that's how that song was composed.
Again, I see pictures here autographed from George Gershwin.
Yes.
Can you tell me, anything about Gershwin?
Well, I never met him, and we just see the copy where he autographed it, that his St. Louis Blues was the father of his Rhapsody in Blue.
Isn't that quite a compliment?
We have a copy of that on the wall, autographed.
Wow, that's quite a compliment.
He said that himself, So well, I think he means that it was St. Louis Blues was the inspiration, and if you listen closely, you will hear a few strains from St. Louis Blues in it.
Well, if that's the case, what was the inspiration for W.C. to create the blues to begin with? Where did he pull his inspiration from?
First of all, he was standing in a train station in Mississippi when he heard someone pluck a few tunes out on something, and he never heard that kind of music before, and he was saying something about the Yellow Dog, and there was two trains. One was the Yellow Dog and the Yazoo, and they met, so it was called Where the Southern Crossed the Yellow Dog. That inspired him years later to write the Yellow Dog Blues. Then another time he was playing for a dance also in Mississippi where the people, they were dancing and he was playing the popular songs of the day. And there was an intermission where another band took over, and he began to see how the people really responded to this other band who was playing the music of the local people, more so, their type of music. And all this was stored in his mind, see, and it wasn't until, I think with the Memphis Blues, with Mr. Crump, really got him started on writing songs, because he did the Memphis Blues, then the St. Louis Blues, which was his most popular song.
Now, wait a minute. What do I hear in the background right now?
The St. Louis Blues.
Uh-huh. And it's that trumpet, right?
Right.
Now, you said that W.C. began as a trumpet player.
Yes, cornet, trumpet.
Now, who's singing?
His daughter, Catherine Handy Lewis.
His daughter Catherine, who was the first to record or sing his St. Louis Blues right there in Memphis, Tennessee, where he started Pace and Handy Music Company. She was a big talker. They say that I kind of talk a lot like her. I'm not sure of it though.
Didn't we hear the soundtrack on the CD a little earlier?
Yes, yes, you did.
And that was her singing?
Yes.
Right.
It's Father of the Blues, a musical autobiography.
So it's not just the music and the songs, it's his personal descriptions of how it came to be and what it meant to him.
Yes, he's narrating, how he played, wrote certain songs.
W.C. Handy was performer first, a cornetist. Then he studied by getting a job as a janitor because he could not attend this university. So then he was able to copy the same theory and method and melodies of a Professor Bach at this university that the white students were. So it was not long after that that he became the conductor, the bandmaster for a college in Normal, Alabama. And so he became a professor. Then a minstrel. He was the first black American to become an orchestrator. He actually was allowed in the Mahara's minstrels to orchestrate the music. This was unheard of.
There are pictures all over the place, but you showed me before we started a picture of Charlie?
Yes, this is a picture of Charles Handy at the home of W.C. Handy's 83rd birthday party. And
Why don't you show it this way?
this is Charles Handy right here. And this is W.C. Handy's 83rd birthday party at his home in Yonkers, New York.
Now, he's a very dapper man. We can see that immediately because he's got a carnation and he's got that white frilled handkerchief and the double-breasted suit and the vest. He was a classy guy.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it rubbed off on you? Because I think it did.
Thank you.
And I thought that everyone dressed with suit and ties and sophisticated and great-grandfather wasn't out of the ordinary, or W.C. Handy Jr. wasn't out of the ordinary, or the way I saw Aunt Minnie getting dressed to go to work. Because at these big galas at the estate, it was nothing to see, James Weldon and Rosamond Johnson or Hubie Blake. I have a picture here where this was his very last birthday. That's me.
There we go.
And but I can remember, the whole house was in turmoil preparing to go to this big birthday party, which was his last, and Nat King Cole was going to be there. As a child, 6 years old, I can remember that there was so much talk about this movie. Nat King Cole was going to play the part in the movie. And Nat King Cole already had his television program. And so this was a big star. We're taking a person that we see on this little black and white television, and he's going to be at Grandpa's house. And that was a real reality.
Well, we only really licensed mostly W.C. Handy's songs. Okay, you could take like the Glenn Miller story with June Allison and James Smith. They played St. Louis Blues March. They have the producers have to go through our agent, and they will send us a quote. For the most part, yes. There have been other songs, individuals, but mostly his songs. St. Louis Blues, Memphis Blues, or Beale Street Blues, like that was in The Great Gatsby. St. Louis Blues March was also in Soldier Story. Harlem Blues was in Mo Better Blues, and was numerous others.
Okay, now
But in his autobiography, he definitely writes about how he would plan to go to Europe, and then his plans would change, and that he has no regrets, that it was here in America that he made his stake, so to speak.
That's what really astounds me. He was able to start here, make his stake, and then branch out and have people around the world appreciate what he had created. Now, pretty recently, the legend, the presence, the present of this organization was shown off on PBS with the Martin Scorsese series on the origins of the blues. What was it like being a part of that?
Well, we were only a part of it in one episode where my grandfather appeared before this little boy as a ghost. And the music, they did play his music, and they had pictures here in the office on the wall.
Well, you also, and this is tying back into, how did this man born 8 years after emancipation have the tenacity to make it out, so to speak? He didn't get stuck down there in the Delta where Mr. Scorsese put him. You see, he didn't, that showed W.C. Handy appearing in Highway 61. That's the Robert Johnson story, legacy, that he saw the devil. You see, I think it was an afterthought to put Mr. Handy down in Highway 61. Because...
Are you saying it's a documentary that didn't really...
wasn't accurate.
I was going to say it wasn't accurate.
His father was well-read. His grandfather, without the master knowing, was well-read. W.C. Handy was born 8 years after emancipation to 2 former slaves. But you see in the movie, as, fictional as it is, that he purchased a guitar. But they don't say that his father made him return the guitar. He made him return the guitar, and his father made him purchase, with that same money, an unabridged dictionary, Webster's dictionary. Not only did he have to purchase it, he had to memorize every word and definition in this dictionary. I don't know that today, but I most certainly think that an experience like that had a lot to do with his business mind. Have you heard about the calendar number 567, the 107th Congress, second session, Resolution 316 in the United States Senate for the Year of the Blues?
We're looking at it now, and it says, designating the year February 1st, 2003 as the Year of the Blues.
Right, so let's go back to that. Okay. Designating the Year of the Blues, February the 1st, as the Year of the Blues, whereas blues music is the most influential form of American roots music.
Wait a minute. It says roots music, American roots.
Music.
But earlier, Aunt Minnie described it in the words of people that, had no right to even open their mouth as race music. But here, it's roots music, which is a lot
Because
more
we've grown.
valid.
This is 100 years later.
Uh-huh.
This is
So we went from race music to the root of American music.
Thank you, U.S. Senate, for something. Whereas with its impact heard around the world in rock and roll, jazz, rhythm and blues, country, and even classical music. Whereas the blues is a national historic treasure which needs to be preserved, studied, and documented for future generations. Whereas the blues is an important documentation of African American culture in the 20th century. And whereas the various forms of the blues document 20th century American history during the Great Depression and in the areas of race relations, pop culture, and the migration of the United States from a rural agricultural society to an urban industrialized nation. And whereas the blues is the most celebrated form of American roots music, with hundreds of festivals held and millions of new or reissued blues albums re-released each year in the United States. And whereas the blues and blues musicians from the United States, whether old or new, male or female, are recognized and revered worldwide as unique and important ambassadors of the United States and its music. And whereas it is important to educate the young people of the United States to understand that the music that they listen to today has its roots and traditions in the blues. And whereas there are many living legends of the blues in the United States who need to be recognized and to have their story captured and preserved for future generations. And whereas the year 2003 is the centennial anniversary of when W.C. Handy, a classically trained musician, heard the blues for the first time in a train station in Mississippi, thus enabling him to compose the first blues music to distribute throughout the United States and the world, which led him being named Father of the Blues. Now therefore be it resolved that the Senate 1 designates the year beginning February 1, 2003 as the Year of the Blues, and 2 requests that the President issue a proclamation calling on the people of the United States to observe the Year of the Blues with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and educational programs. So, when I say that it wasn't accurate, the resolution itself says that W.C. Handy first heard the blues at a Tutwiler, Mississippi train station. So to say the least, they could have at least put him at the Tutwiler, Mississippi train station. So that's enough of that.
I want to ask you a question.
That's enough of that.
This proclamation began with February 1st, 2003.
Right.
What month do we celebrate Black History Month?
W.C. Handy was the first American of African descent to be honored in the month of February. It wasn't even called Black History Month. When he recorded with his Memphis Blues Band in 1917 for Columbia Records, the record sold so many copies, Columbia Records declared the month of February as W.C. Handy Month.
Now, this is in 1917.
This was by 1918, February of 1918. Okay, and so they hadn't designated that as Black History Month. We celebrate our history, which is part of American history, every day here at Handy Brothers. And so,
You know something?
if they chose February,
Well, they may have chosen February, but you know, at this TV show, which is called That's Brooklyn, we don't celebrate necessarily in February because achievements were not confined to February.
I know many museums that refuse to, take exhibits just because it's February.
Yeah.
They'll purposely open on January 15th, so not to identify with the Black History Month.
I just want to ask you something. You were just talking about the minstrel shows.
Yes.
Minstrel shows at least started with whites wearing blackface.
Exactly.
But you said that great-grandfather appeared in minstrel shows. How did that transition take place?
He became the bandmaster of Mahara's Minstrels, and then the brother Frank Mahara's Minstrels. He became the bandmaster, and there were all blacks. It was because of his ability to write their own orchestrations and his influence that he began to influence the Maharas to bring blacks on board.
Okay, now, not too long ago, there was an off-Broadway show. It was called Jolson and Company, and certain scenes took place with the Dockstader minstrels, and then later they credited him, Al Jolson, with actually starting the USO.
In the second act, I play a stage manager in one of his radio shows. I play Colonel Webster, who was his liaison with the Army when he started the USO, which he practically invented. Jolson was the first performer to go out on a USO tour.
Now, listen, for my next number, I'm going to do a song that I introduced in World War I. Maybe your folks heard me to it. And I would like to dedicate it to the friend of a friend, a sailor named Warren who went down with the Arizona Pearl Harbor. But before I do, I have to tell you that the stage I'm standing on was built this morning by a couple of colored platoons, and they got them sitting all the way in the back there. Now, I think that stinks, don't you? I'm on stage because of them. So you guys, please come right down front. Yeah, just come right down front. Thank you. Thank you. Your people and my people both know that when life gets hard, we can turn it into a song. And from the song, we get the strength to fight on. Professor. Mine, mine, your little rolling stone that rolled away, strolled away. Mine, that rolling stone is rolling home today. There to stay, oh, just to see your smiling face. Smile, a welcome smile. When I'm in your warm embrace, listen, Mammy,
That's right.
So if people think maybe, stereotypes, or maybe they think
He exploited them.
he didn't. In
No.
fact, he saw the relationship, the problems the Jews had, the
Exactly.
blacks had.
Yes.
He had sympathy for other people that were mistreated.
That's right.
And
That's
he
right.
wasn't mocking,
That's right.
he was giving their music a chance.